our problems are long-term and global. This is a very big challenge.
Welcome to Davos Direct. Now, many people yesterday were complaining that the weather is warmer than expected. The gods seem to have listened to them, and it is indeed snowing. It is very, very cold. Colder than I can tell you on camera. Let's talk about day 3 though. Day 2 was all about politics and politicians who took the world by surprise. But day 3 was about the biggest thought leaders, the financial giants, and the biggest economists who took center stage at Davos. George Soros, one of the most respected voices at the World Economic Forum, does assert that interest rates in the United States will rise and rise very soon. He expects that to happen this year itself, given the fact that US economy will recover. As far as Europe is concerned, he believes the worst is behind that continent, but recovery will be very painful. He's not a big fan of Angela Merkel, who he blames for all the problems that plague that continent. He blames Germany for keeping the peripheral nations in a perpetual state of inferiority. George Soros' view seems to be echoed by the European Central Bank President Mario Draghi, who does believe that the renewed calm, tranquility and confidence that is being reflected in European markets is perhaps not being reflected in the real economy of that region.
The level of economic activity is in the process of stabilizing at very low levels. And we foresee a recovery in the second part of the year. It is a situation where you have what I called once a positive contagion on the financial markets and for the financial variables, but we don't see this being transmitted into the real economy yet. Financial markets are experiencing a new restored sense of I would say, relative tranquility. No matter which index you look, spreads, liquidity, corporate issuance, bond issuance, even sovereign spreads, all the volatility, all the indices point out to a substantial improvement of financing conditions.
While countries like the United States and Europe grapple with their old problems and also reel under pressure, Jeffery Sachs believes that countries like India and China should look at each other more often than looking at the developed world. He's also of the firm opinion that there is a global contagion and these countries cannot really escape that. Speaking of the present-day politicians, he believes they have short-term political ambitions and their only ambition is to be re-elected to office. He warns the world against petty politics which can harm global recovery.
We're all worried a little bit about the politics, and there was gridlock in India over many, many reform issues. There are still big challenges on the budget, on national strategy, on infrastructure. So India has a lot of work to do. It's not impervious to the global environment by any means, because a lot of India's business and growth depends on an export market. Of course, I've always been bullish on India, but these are now major policy challenges that have been difficult for India's complicated politics to handle.
Okay, I'm going to ask you more world-specific questions. I'm glad you've taken the India ones. Do you think the world has learned lessons from the crisis that we've seen in 2008? Do you think people are more cognizant of what we are doing right now? Because if you look at the global equity market, for instance, across the world they have rallied. Many people believe they are a little detached from reality. They are rallying ahead of the curve.
I think in general we didn't learn very many lessons because the dominant interests, which are the financial markets, have basically wanted the world just to go back to the pre-2008 environment. And the markets are rallying because liquidity has been pumped into the system by the major central banks. If you pump in enough money, you can get the equities to rally. But what we didn't learn were the systemic lessons of regulation, of honesty, transparency, the corruption between the financial sector and the political sector. There was very little real lesson learned. And you look back now at documents being released by the Fed in 2007, it shows that the same leaders that are now at the Fed didn't understand almost at all what was happening in 2007. After the crisis came, I don't think they understand what they did even then till today.
Those are worrying signs, but do you think the United States will be able to tackle its debt-ceiling crisis? Because I think the next big event that the world is watching and watching rather nervously is that.
The bigger problem is that the U.S. government really doesn't do very much these days, other than hand out some money. It doesn't solve any longer-term problems on infrastructure, education, climate change. I don't think that's going to change in the short term.
The world is seeing anemic growth. We are seeing global liquidity. We are seeing low interest rates, and it looks like this is the new normal for the world. At a time like this, what are the fault lines that you think exist across the globe?
I think that the world still could achieve significant growth in the developing countries. So India, China, Africa, the Indian Ocean economy, Southeast Asia, this is a region that needs major advances in infrastructure, in technology. A lot of the future will depend on information technology. India is well positioned to use information technology as a lever for long-term development. I think the biggest syndrome is the rich countries. Both Europe and the United States are going to grow slowly, and they're also tied up in institutional knots. Our vested interests are very powerful. The slow growth is going to be with us for a while. And India, China, Africa, again, really need not to look at those traditional markets, but to look to each other and say, we're making the 21st century now. We're more than half, the world population. We don't have to look at the U.S. and Europe the way we did before as our only outlet and only source of growth. We need to invent something new here. But I think for such huge countries as India and China, it's going to have to invent something new that's compatible with all the environmental threats as well. So it's a very big task. And so far, I don't think governments have really grasped how big a challenge this is.
I know I'm holding you up from your next assignment, but a quick last question. Across the world, if you see from continents, US, Europe, Asia, India specifically, we are actually seeing politics take center stage. Politics is what is calling shots even as economic decision-making is concerned. At one level, don't you think this political standoff, even the one that we have seen in the United States or the kind of one we are seeing in the Eurozone, do you think it's, at one level it's very frustrating?
Of course it's frustrating because the world should not run for the purpose of the re-election of the politicians. It used to run for the kings and queens of the world. It's a little bit better now. But still, we shouldn't run for the courtesy of the politicians that, well, they face an election, so nothing's going to happen for the next 2 years. We don't have the luxury to wait for that. So I think this is a very big challenge. Politics are short-term and local. Our problems are long-term and global. How do we make real problem-solving work when our politicians have a very, very narrow short-term interest, their own re-election, and yet we as citizens have longer-term interests. We want our children to grow up in a decent world. We have not been able to make that bridge yet effective.
We continue to get you the big voices, the big trends, and the big news from the World Economic Forum 2013. From the biggest corporates to the biggest bankers, they are all here. And the question that I put forward to Chanda Kochhar, the Managing Director of ICICI Bank, who's here, is that RBI is ready with its policy on the 29th of January. A 0.25% cut in key rates has already been budgeted for. But can Governor Subba really bring a surprise?
From now up to the financial year 2014, so that's the next 15 months, we should see about 100 basis points cut in the interest rates. The question is whether one starts in January with a 25 or a 50 basis points. I think, the start would be made with a 25 basis points and then followed up, as I said, over the next 12 and 15 months.
Do you think budget is the big cue that the RBI will wait and watch?
Yeah, so I think one is inflation is the cue that they're watching, but there seems to be stability there. On the fiscal consolidation, as you said, the government is in fact making an intention to say that it's not just the budget. We are taking steps as we go along. So these are two very positive points. But that's why I think that, the first move could probably be about 25 basis points, and then if the budget gives them even more confidence, the next 25 can come soon.
Do you expect the CRR cut to also come in with the 25 basis points rate cut that you're talking about?
Actually, if you see, CRR is currently at probably the lowest that the country has seen. But, it's just a question of how much and how quick is the transmission of that interest rates to the borrowers that we want. And therefore, if we want a quick transmission, I think a mix of policy rate cut and CRR cut together helps bring about, translate those lower lending rates to the consumers faster.
Inflation is beginning to soften. I think that was enemy number one for the central bank. They said inflation has to soften before we do anything on rates. That is beginning to happen. But do you think at one level, because we are staring at a decade low growth, the RBI has been a tad too conservative?
It's always very easy to pass comments from the outside. We have to remember that the regulator's job is also very complex in trying to balance. It's not just inflation and growth, but it's currency and currency movements and interest rates and so many other things. So I would say that, they've probably chosen the balance in the sense that they wanted to. But I would only say that from here on, it's important to revive growth. And to revive growth, interest rates is one of the factors. There are other things as well that we need to do. And the most important of that is actually get investments back.
The question really is that many reforms have been made. The RBI had initially said that they would want to see fiscal correction. They would want to see fiscal action. The big concern still continues to be the twin deficit, current account and fiscal deficit. On the current account front, the RBI in its report has raised many concerns. How deep a concern is it for bankers like yourself?
I think it impacts the economy, the currency, the currency rates and so on. So in that sense, it impacts all the players in the economic system. But we have to remember that all said and done, we are a huge import economy. I think it's time we also start thinking of how to minimize imports in order to reduce the current account deficit. And there are many industries still where we do import a lot of the components, and those are the industries, for example, the electronics industry. I think there's huge amount of components in imports that take place. Gradually, we should Indianize these industries. We should actually Indianize production, encourage Indian manufacturing here, and that's the way we should work on reducing imports.
A make or break budget. Of course, Congress party wants it to be a populist budget. The finance minister knows that there is a fiscal deficit concern. How should we be walking the tightrope?
I think the two important requirements for us in India is one, growth, and the second is fiscal consolidation. So I would, that is my expectation of budget, that, while the country always needs some amount of populist measures, but I think, we have to keep the overriding factor of fiscal consolidation and growth enabling factors in mind. The other thing I would say is that, we should also now try and move out of this mindset to say that budget is the cure-all for everything for the entire 1 year. I think we have to start moving and taking steps almost on a daily basis to get our economy moving. And in a way, to be fair, I think, the decisions that you've seen around the diesel prices, etc., one has not waited for the budget. Those decisions have started. So I think, that is the pace we should keep going for. Budget should be really a presentation of the profit and loss and the cash flow, but the measures should be taken throughout the year.
Do you think we've averted a downgrade threat?
I think we have definitely given a lot of confidence. Again, as you were gauging the mood here about Eurozone last year vis-a-vis this year, if I were to gauge the mood of the rating agencies, I think first of all they have seen inflation stabilizing. They've seen a good intent in the last few months towards fiscal consolidation. So I think these are the two comforts that we have given. They will clearly watch that we actually take concrete steps towards fiscal consolidation. But I would say if we continue on this path, we are definitely avoiding the risk of downgrade.
The other thing that Indian banking space, I think, is looking at and looking very keenly on is the new banking licenses. The RBI is working on norms. The finance ministry wants it to happen as soon as possible. And the debate is very much on whether it should be given to corporates who have a vested interest or should it not be given. Which side of the debate are you on?
Well, I think there is, Indian banking industry, as I always say, can grow at 2.5 times the GDP. So there is enough of banking business to be done for the next many years. Now, that will mean that yes, the newer banks will also have a place and an opportunity to grow. The existing banks will have enough opportunity to become bigger and bigger. So I think, there is, in terms of business, there is enough business. Whether corporate houses or not, I think that's really the regulator's point of view to see how much controls can they put in. And, if they put in controls, they may be comfortable at a certain level. If those controls are difficult to exercise, then I think it's not a comforting way to move.
Chanda Kochhar clearly isn't the only one who's eyeing the monetary policy review by the RBI. Other bankers like Jaspal Bindra of Standard Chartered are doing that as well. But the one thing that's on radar of bankers especially is the fact that RBI is also going to be soon ready with its banking licenses. Whether corporates should be given banking licenses or not, is there a vested interest? Is there prudence in that debate? That's the question we put forward to Jaspal Bindra of Standard Chartered.
The debate on whether corporates should be allowed to open banks rages on. Slamming the central bank's cautious approach, Standard Chartered's global director and Asia head Jaspal Bindra says the RBI should refrain from adopting a holier-than-thou approach.
I'm firmly in the camp that the licenses should be given to those with deep pockets. If that happens to be only corporate houses or financial institutions in India, then it has to go to those people because it's no point sort of trying to get very holy on the line of saying it has to go with no connectivity, etc.
Bindra, on his part, maintains that the central bank will have to ensure that there are adequate checks and balances for the new bank's management, irrespective of its ownership.
As long as we have arm's length enforcement of the rules effectively, which India has now had quite a good track record of on governance on the regulatory side. So I feel quite comfortable with the corporates being allowed. And we need more banks, we need the competition, we need to grow the market.
The RBI has already built in enough caveats to ensure that new bank licenses don't land up in the wrong hands. Combine that with its veto power, Subbarao may have the last laugh, no matter what the government and corporates want. Bureau Report, ET Now.
Of the entire battalion of India Inc. that's present here, the ones in demand most are really the tech titles. IT seems to be the big story. After all, there are global shoots of recovery that are visible, and most IT giants present here want to make the most of it. Infosys, for one, is happy with the third quarter it has delivered, hopes the momentum to continue, and asserts it has had a very, very packed Davos schedule, meeting clients and negotiating deals. Shibu Lal in conversation with ET Now.
We expect the budgets to be flat or marginally down, but at the same time, I think many corporations are focused on driving efficiency, driving productivity. Some of them are starting to look at future and thinking about how they will drive growth and differentiation in their own markets. So, but the budgets are yet to be closed.
Is it fair to presume here that the third quarter has been a turning point as far as Infosys is concerned? Is this your turnaround quarter?
We did well in Q3. We had good deal wins. We won about $900 million of business and IT operations deal, which is actually part of our core services. Our consulting grew by 8% organically, and including inorganic 15%. So we have done well in Q3. Now Q4, as I said, we have visibility for about 95 to 96%. We are working very hard to bridge.
You kept saying that the environment hasn't changed significantly. There is still volatility that remains in that environment. KV Kamath in an exclusive chat with us also said that it's too early to party. What then has really changed on the ground, and how does one really read into your performance on the back of these statements?
So as I said, the world has not changed. In one quarter, world cannot change. We did well in Q3. In Q4, we have decided to go with our guidance of at least 5% for the year. When we enter a quarter, we have visibility for about 95 to 96% of our revenue. But for 5% of revenue, it's 5% of $1.8 billion. That's approximately $90 million to be made up. So we are working very hard on it.
Before we wrap it up on Davos Direct for this edition, we continue to get you the lighter sides of CEOs. They've been coming here for years, and which is why we asked many of them, what is it about the World Economic Forum that is special? What are their fondest memories and also the funniest incidents? Have some fun.
I walked out of a meeting and somebody looks at me, who's well known to me, and says, look, how was your ski? I said, I don't ski. Why do you say that? He said, you dress so casually.
I was going to a reception and I didn't know that I hadn't put on my spikes.
Oh no!
So just when I reached the reception there, you needed to go down, and I went straight down. And then being a mean man, I tried to hold on to somebody, one of my colleagues. I was worried about my coat more than my pay.
I don't know if it's funny, but I see so many people slipping on the roadside.
Many years ago, there was a dinner session with religious leaders. People thought that this session was going to be about calming people down. But it became a battle between various religious leaders. They were very upset, but all of us had a big laugh about it.
The only thing I can say is that I lost my coat the first day I was here, and it's quite cold.
It's been one big party. It just reminds me of my university days when we used to go from one party to the other all night.
Lots of old friends to meet?
A lot of old friends who I hadn't seen for 20 years.